Welcome to our next lesson on the Age of Exploration. So, in the last lesson, just to recap a bit, we talked about the reasons for exploration. What got most of the Europeans to just go and just explore the world? What kind of got them off their duff a bit? And the main things we covered is just this idea that they wanted trade routes to areas that they were cut off from, and realized that they wanted a better lifestyle, wanted better food, clothing, things like that. And they, like everybody, they just wanted it at cheaper prices. And this just led off on this idea of like, okay, let's see what we can do. And then you had just kind of this excitement, this sense of adventure that went into it, this idea, can we do it or not? And basically they head off. And we talked a lot of these things, and over time it did turn into this idea of like, hey, we need to explore new areas because we're building huge empires. But that, again, one more time, was not a original reason for exploration, but definitely becomes a major motivation throughout the age of exploration, all the way into the 17 and early 1800s. So, anyways, that was just a bit of a recap of the last lesson. But that brings us into this lesson where we talk about who these explorers are. Now, I'm going to be generally going over these explorers, but I'm going to be focusing on three in particular. You could say the three more impactful are the ones that when they did what they did, it led to what everybody else did type thing. So, the map you see off to the right here is just, it's a good map I was able to find. It just shows some of the more well-known explorers and their routes from the old world to the new world, or going around the world. I'll come back to this map in a little bit. First off, where I want to go is to this slide. So this is usually an assignment we do. We get the textbooks out, maps out. I have a couple things I like to show, and then some charts we make up and things like that. Can't really do that in this lesson, so I'm just going to be giving you the just kind of the short and sweet of each of these explorers. Let's put it this way. I divided out which explorers, some of the more important explorers, and which countries they sailed for. So for instance, Portuguese explorers, starting with Bartholomew Diaz, who is one of the guys we're going to be talking about more, and one of the more important, really important explorers that starts off the age of exploration. After him, Vasco da Gama, Pedro Cabral, Amerigo Vespucci, and major Spanish explorers. There's a lot more than the three I named there, but these are the three that at least you need to make sure you know. That's Columbus, Vasco Núñez de Balboa, and Ferdinand Magellan. Then we get into French explorers, a little less well known, at least. We don't talk about these guys as much, but you have Cartier, Champlain, La Salle. I think I'm saying those names right. Then you have British/Dutch explorers. Henry Hudson, who sailed for both the Dutch and the English, and they have John Cabot in areas they go to. So, anyways, I'm going to be going back and forth a little bit on these lists. But just really simply, when you get to those Portuguese explorers, Bartholomew Diaz, can't see this that well, but hopefully you can see my cursor a little bit. He starts in Portugal, and he gets down to the southern tip of Africa. The importance of this is he was able to find a way around Africa. I'll talk about this a little bit more. Vasco da Gama goes all the way around Africa and gets to India and comes back. Then you have Pedro Cabral. He's the guy that, well, I don't know how to put this, kind of, to sum it up a bit, he kind of accidentally discovers Brazil, but he's the reason why Brazil speaks Portuguese today. And then you have Amerigo Vespucci. The reason why he's known is just Amerigo's named after him. He's the first guy that realized, wait a minute, that's a new world. That's not the East Indies or the India and China that we're thinking we're getting to. This is a completely new place. So hence, Americas are named after him. You have the Spanish explorers, Christopher Columbus first, who was the first guy to get to the New World, although he didn't realize it at the time. Later on, you get Balboa. Balboa is actually this little line right here. He's the one that found proof that it was a new world. That there's the Pacific Ocean on that side. We might need to rethink things a little bit. Then you have like the French and the English and the one Henry Hudson, the Dutch and English explorer. If you notice, all their lines are all the way up here the whole time. The reason being is the Spanish and Portuguese did a lot to basically consolidate control of these areas down here, and they would not let the French and Spanish and English really get down there as well, unless they were pirates hiding around in the Caribbean. I'll get to that one later. So, what they're looking for, though, is what's called the Northwest Passage. It was believed that they could find some other trade route that would get them through the Americas and over to China and India, over to where the good stuff was, you could say. And just a lot of exploring going on, but they never found that. But instead, they claimed the territory up there, and that's the main reason why the two major languages that we see between Canada and the United States are English and French. So you do have some Dutch in there, and Germans come along later, but it's mainly those English and French explorers that really set the stage. So anyways, that's just some basic stuff that goes in there, just who explorers are, where they're coming from, where they're trying to get to. But at this point, we need to start talking more about the importance of, I don't want to call them the three really big ones, which are Bartholomew Diaz, Christopher Columbus, and Ferdinand Magellan. What they do really is above everything. They set the stage for everybody else. Let's just put it that way. So, moving on. First off, Bartholomew Diaz. You could say his voyage is the thing that just set everything off in the first place. He took his one little ship, and his whole purpose was to kind of he was an explorer. He wanted to go on an adventure, but he definitely wanted to try to see if there was a way to get to India, get into those trade routes if possible, claim more land for God and country, and that type of thing. And he sails down the coast of Africa. Not to go too much into it. Once he reaches the Cape of Good Hope, and he goes through quite a trial to get down there, if you read his story. But the Cape of Good Hope is on the southern tip of South Africa, of the African continent. And when he finds out, he realizes there is a way around. From my understanding of the world, they do not have an understanding of the world map, the way the globe looks, the way the continents look, the way we do today. And he's one of the main reasons why we even have an understanding today. He kind of starts it off, you could say. But he gets down there and realizes, I think it's possible. It's possible to get around there. He heads back into Portugal, shares what he found, and that inspired others, like Vasco da Gama, to go try that voyage again, get down to the southern tip of Africa, make it around, and get up to India. And Vasco da Gama is the first person to get to India and back. But he wouldn't have done it if Bartholomew Diaz didn't pave the way first. So that makes Bartholomew Diaz just one of the more important guys to look at in not just the history of the age of exploration, but just all of human history in general. His voyage was in the year 1487, before anybody else's, and you could say, just started off everything. So, soon after Bartholomew Diaz, I almost put Da Gama and Diaz together, sorry. Soon after Bartholomew Diaz, you get Christopher Columbus. So, I really like to give an explanation behind Columbus and just how things went, but I'll keep this simple. I'll try to, at least. With Christopher Columbus, he saw what Diaz did. He believed that there was other ways to get to basically Asia, believing that you could sail around the world. You didn't have to go around Africa, and maybe it would even be a shorter trip. He was wrong on that part. But again, he was working with maps, instruments, and just theories at the time that he was willing to take a risk on. So he is finally allowed by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabel of Spain, the newly formed Kingdom of Spain, by the way. It's a new kingdom at this point in the 1400s. The marriage of those two monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabel, actually create the modern-day state of Spain. It didn't exist beforehand. And the only reason they even let him go is they had finally won the war against the Muslim kingdoms in southern Spain, namely the Kingdom of Granada, the Muslim Kingdom of Granada. And they got a lot of spoils of war from that. You could say a lot of riches and wealth. And so Columbus, who had just been nagging them, please let me go, please let me go. And he was almost ready to go to some other kingdom and ask for help and just getting his voyage going. They finally said, all right, we'll just throw some your way. It's one of those things like they're just playing the roulette table or something like that. And it's like, we don't know if your venture's going to work, but hey, we got a lot of wealth now, so here's 3 ships, here's some crews, and go do what you can do. So Columbus sails as best he can over there. If you've heard the whole story, like they're almost to the point of turning back, and then they finally see land. Now, Columbus thinks that he has actually gotten to the Indies. He thinks he's gotten to India, to where he wants to get to, those Spice Islands, and get those trade routes going. Hence why he calls this the Indies. You could say it's one of the big mistakes of all time. Again, just they were going off the knowledge they had at the moment, but we look back and say, oh, that was bad, and kind of didn't help us with just identifying certain peoples of the world. But Indians from India, well, you could say like those are Indians, but because he thought he was there in the Indies, he called the Native Americans Indians, and that name stuck. So, by the way, my high school mascot were the Indians. So, where was I? But Christopher Columbus does discover the New World. He doesn't realize it. That name Indian does stick to the Native Americans that he meets. But he gets back, and he actually makes 3 more voyages over time, one of which, I can't remember if it's the 3rd or 4th, he actually does get down to South America and discovers, I think, what would today be Venezuela. So he does hit the mainland at one point, instead of just the islands that later on are known as the West Indies, once people realized, oh, wait a minute, there's the East Indies, the ones we were trying to get to, but then there's these Indies that Christopher Columbus named, but we've been calling it that for forever, so we'll just leave it, but we'll name it the West Indies. So you get the birth of what are called the West Indies, which is basically the Caribbean islands just south of Florida there, and you have the East Indies, which is Indonesia today. Again, hopefully remembering your world maps there. So, anyways, just huge deal for Christopher Columbus to get over here. Now, if any of you know a little bit about history and you're thinking, well, wait a minute, I was told that the Vikings got there first. Well, you would be correct. It is a fact that the first Europeans to get into the Americans that we know of, at least, are the Vikings, that they made it over. They made it to Canada. Well, today's Canada, more specifically the island of Newfoundland. But the big deal between the Vikings and Columbus is this. When the Vikings got there, they didn't tell a soul. It wasn't a big deal. Like, the whole world wasn't changed by that. And then they disappear. And they're still trying to find out to this day just what happened to those Viking settlements in Canada. They've been unearthed. They've been going over things. There's some records that point to, like, okay, we might know some of the people went over, but again, it's still a big mystery. What happened to those Vikings, almost 1,000 years ago when they got there. Columbus, about 500 years ago, when he gets to the Americas, the discovery sticks, and the impact is made there. This is why he is given the credit for the discovery of the New World, because with him, the information is spread far and wide. Not just Spain learns about the Americas, but all the kingdoms of Europe, the kingdoms of Africa, the kingdoms of the Middle East, and also, yes, China and India learn that, oh, there's a whole new place out there. And this is huge. It's huge for just the development of the world and the progress, you could say, of human history in general. When you have all of these societies that are in the Americas that are, you could say, are isolated there, and all these societies that are in the old world, basically Eurasia and Africa, and isolated as they are, finally come together, the world is never the same and will never be the same after the voyage of Christopher Columbus, not the Vikings. Anyways, to put that in perspective. So, once he discovers this, and both sides come to know each other more. It was called the Old World versus the New World. That's, of course, a perspective thing. Old World to the people who are from there. Anyways, because the Old World is a new world to the people in the New World, if you get my gist here. But when he comes over, of course, you get this exchange of stuff. And this exchange of stuff becomes known as what's called the Columbian Exchange, named after Christopher Columbus. Just to give you an idea of what this exchange of stuff looks like, and this is where the huge impact comes in, and why Columbus, this is why he's in all the history books and will always be in all the history books, is because of the switching of stuff. Just take a second and look at that for a little bit, and think of all the things you eat that require something from both sides there. Heck, like a pizza, a hamburger, chocolate. Those are all things that you would not have today if Old World did not meet New World, because they have ingredients from both sides. Chocolate is usually the main thing talked about here, where you get the cacao bean, of the Americas combined with cane sugar of the Old World, and voila, you have the world's greatest treat. So, although just a quick, okay, I need to tell this story. I wasn't thinking of telling this story, but I'll just tell this quick story. Just how chocolate was invented, at least how I understand it myself, let's put it that way. Basically, one of the things to do during this time was, during the Age of Exploration, is when you could kind of find something to introduce to one of the kings of Europe, say the King of Spain or the King of France. In this case, it's the King of France. You want to wow them. And if you wow the king, he'll favor you, and you'll have a great life. He'll be admitted to his court, and yada, yada, yada. Well, you had some people that are like, let's give King Louis, I believe it was King Louis XIV, I could be wrong there, but let's give King Louis, this mixture from the old world. They drink this mixture with cacao beans, and it's really bitter, and maybe he'll like it. So they give him basically this kind of like hot cocoa tea drink. I don't know what to call it. Anyways, incredibly bitter. The cacao bean is incredibly bitter by itself. And when the king drinks it, he is pissed. It tastes so bad, to the point where he's about to behead the people that gave it to him. Of course, they're scared to death, and they beg for their lives, and they ask for one more chance, and he grants them one more chance, again, according to the way I understand the story. And just the way things go is like, all right, how can we make this better? And they just dump a ton of sugar into it. And so they bring it back. And essentially, chocolate, the first time it was ever introduced to the court of King Louis, again, I believe it was the court of King Louis of France. He loved it, of course. Hot chocolate, basically. And then from there, we get, the European chocolates we think of today. Like, we always think of chocolate being a European thing. Well, yeah, it was invented there, but it wasn't possible until you had the cacao bean that came from the Americas in the first place. So, anyways, that's the Columbian Exchange for this exchange of stuff. But it also isn't just the exchange of stuff. The next thing you need to have in your notes about the Columbian Exchange is, yes, you have all these things like potatoes and pineapples and horses and cows and fruits, or citrus fruits and things like that. But it's also an exchange of ideas, technology. You have gunpowder technology coming from the old world to the new world. The peoples in the new world, they are beyond wowed by gunpowder technology. And unfortunately for them, they're also subdued by gunpowder technology because they are not that far advanced. But then you get things about the, how would you put it? Like, the peoples in the Americas were very heightened in things like astronomy. Like, they were very up there in astronomy. You could easily argue much more than the old world. And so you have this sharing of ideas going back and forth there. And last up, you also have sharing of, diseases. And again, when I was growing up, I was taught that there were diseases from the New World that came to the Old World, and diseases from the Old World that come to the New World. But the way things have been playing out lately is, again, this is just a theory, is that it is likely that all the transfer of diseases to the Columbian Exchange, all came from Old World to New World, and there was nothing that came from New World to Old World. In fact, again, this is just a theory, but it might be that there actually was no disease in the Americas. They actually didn't have that. Had that at all, and it would actually be one of the explanations why disease was so devastating to the native populations. By the way, I'm kind of hoping you've had lessons on this before, but if you didn't know this, it's believed up to 90% of the native populations of the Americas die due to exposure to old world diseases. The Europeans that brought these over, they had no clue what they were doing here at this point, but it became their most devastating weapon, you could say, to essentially creating New World empires. It was a very devastating and just disastrous thing that happens to the Native American population. So, but anyways, that's kind of Columbus as best I can give it to you in a nutshell there, and just his impact in world history, especially from the Age of Exploration. The last guy that we do need to talk about is Ferdinand Magellan. Now, Ferdinand Magellan is seen, or basically written about, as the first guy ever to sail around the world. You kind of give it to him, but it's really his first mate, a guy named Del Cano, that actually made it around the world physically, you could say, on that one trip. Because he survives. Magellan actually dies halfway through this trip. I'll explain in a second. But he is given credit because he is the one that started this off. He got this going. He saw it through until he died. And then his crew kind of fulfilled his wishes and finally got back, but proved the empirical data, you could say, the proof that the world was round type thing. Now, by the way, this whole notion that everybody believed the world was flat. That's not the case. Were there a lot of people, especially in Europe, that did believe the world was flat at the time? Well, yeah, a lot of people did, especially a lot of the uneducated. And we talked about in our last unit, the medieval unit, how people just weren't educated, mostly. Now, did you have some educated minds in Europe that definitely knew that that was not the case, that the world was a globe? And do people throughout world history know this? Yes. Yes, they did. This is actually, it has been more knowledgeable through human history, to my understanding, that the world is round, to the various civilizations through history is what I'm talking about, than that the world is flat. So, anyways, just to put one out there, because, again, if you were like me and grew up here, you sing those little jingles growing up, the world is flat, no, the world is round, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, first grade, kindergarten, that type of thing. So, but Magellan, he is the one that proves that that's the case. You see his route starts from Spain, heads down around the southern tip of South America. In fact, it's named the Strait of Magellan now because of this, because of his voyage. Gets across the Pacific Ocean somehow. That seems like must have been a bit of a crazy part of the journey. Must have been running low on supplies there. Get to the Philippine Islands. That's where you have the date 1521 there, and that's where he dies. Again, I know the story about how he dies. All I can say is this. I'm not going to tell you the story here. Look it up. It is an interesting story how Magellan dies. But then his crew continues their voyage, and they're able to make it back, even though the Portuguese are looking to take them out. They get back, sail up the coast of Africa, and get back to Spain, proving that it was possible, which just opened up so much more possibilities for future explorers, knowing that that's the case, not just thinking that's the case, but knowing that the world is round. Anyways, the word we give this, by the way, is circumnavigate, that Magellan circumnavigated the world, and the idea of sailed around the world. So there you go. Those are just some of the major explorers, Diaz, Columbus, and Magellan, and how they just set the stage for the age of exploration and everybody else that comes afterwards. And with that, I will see you in the next lesson.